What's that?
Something Mark Twain wrote.
You mean, Huckleberry Finn Mark Twain?
That Mark Twain.
Was he Jewish?
No, but he wrote this 100 years ago. It's about us.
Jewish people represent such a tiny part of the human race that they should hardly be heard of. But they are as prominent as any people on the planet. Their contributions to the arts, science, medicine, and finance are completely out of proportion to their numbers. With their hands tied behind them, the Jewish people have put up quite a fight in this world, and they have won. People come and go, but the Jew remains. What is the secret of their immortality? During the turbulent 60s, Bob Dylan's songs were a poetic call for peace and racial equality. He wrote about what was happening in people's hearts and what was happening on the street.
Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me. I'm not sleepy and there is no...
40 years after landing in Greenwich Village, this living legend is still a vital force in music.
In 1962, a record store clerk named Brian Epstein heard 4 ragtag rockers playing in a Liverpool pub. He became their manager, cleaned the boys up, and after countless rejections, finally got them a record deal. Their first album caused an international sensation.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles!
Close your eyes and I'll kiss you. Tomorrow I'll miss you. Remember, I'll always do.
These great Jewish achievers all ruled the airwaves.
We'd like to know a little bit about you for our fine. We'd like to help you learn to help yourself. Sweet Caroline, good times never seem so good. Sweet Caroline, I believe they never could.
Hold me in just like I was Eddie Harris. She eating crazy cheese like you would think I'm from Paris. You know I get high, you think I get high. You know that I'm born and I'ma tell you all why.
In the 50s, great Jewish musicians like Stan Getz and Dave Brubeck introduced cool jazz. Singer-songwriter Mel Torme had a vocal style that was often imitated, never duplicated.
I'm wild again, beguiled again, a simpering, whimpering child again.
In the 40s, Benny Goodman and Artie Shaw were the kings of swing.
George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue is a masterpiece. When Gershwin's moving melodies called for a lyric, his brother Ira would write them.
Someone to watch over me.
At 13, Irving Berlin was singing for tips in a Bowery saloon. 10 years later, he wrote a hit called Alexander's Ragtime Band and became an international star. Irving Berlin composed more than 1,000 songs, and he wrote them for everyone.
There's no business like show business like no business I know.
Why don't you go where fashion sits, putting on the Ritz? Blue skies looking at me, nothing but blue skies.
Irving Berlin's most popular song might be this one.
God bless America, my home, sweet home.
Felix Mendelssohn's Wedding March is one of the most famous melodies of all time.
Gustav Mahler was the first composer to experiment with key structures. Arnold Schoenberg's revolutionary 12-tone system changed music forever. Legend Vladimir Horowitz is considered the most important classical pianist of the 20th century.
Isaac Stern has performed for audiences on every continent. He also led the fight to preserve Carnegie Hall. Arthur Fiedler was the first symphony conductor to receive a Presidential Medal of Freedom. Grammy Award winner Leonard Bernstein conducted the New York Philharmonic and wrote the music for West Side Story.
Star soprano Beverly Sills went on to become director of the New York City Opera.
The great Yitzhak Perlman battled polio as a child. Today, he thrills audiences from a wheelchair.
Newspaper men eating candy had to be held down by big police. But someday everything's gonna be different when I paint that masterpiece.
Most people wouldn't guess that artists with names like Modigliani and Pissarro were Jewish.
But they were.
Known for his classically styled figures and oval-faced portraits, Amadeo Modigliani died at the age of 26. Today, his work hangs in New York City's Museum of Modern Art and the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. Camille Pissarro would use his canvas to make political statements. Unlike many artists, Pissarro was praised by the critics of his day.
Marc Chagall drew on Jewish life for inspiration.
During the 60s, Peter Max's work was a symbol of the youth movement.
Inspired by her many trips to Mexico, Louise Nevelson used commonly found materials to create her art.
Considered the father of photojournalism, Alfred Eisenstadt's most famous photograph marks the end of World War II. Award-winning architect Frank Gehry is another great Jewish achiever.
His buildings are considered to be works of art. One of our most important writers was also one of the youngest. Anne Frank was 12 years old when her family went into hiding from the Nazis. During the 2 years they spent living in an attic, Anne wrote a diary that became a bestseller. When Hitler's men discovered the hiding place, Anne Frank was sent to a concentration camp, where she died just a few weeks before the liberation. Her father, who somehow survived, made sure his daughter's diary was shared with the world. These award-winning authors and playwrights are all great Jewish achievers.
Author Elie Wiesel received a Congressional Medal of Honor and the Nobel Peace Prize for promoting human rights. His novels deal with the horrors people suffered under the Nazis during World War II. It's something that Elie Wiesel knows about. As a boy, he lost both of his parents to the Holocaust.
Dick Simon and Max Schuster wrote the very first book of crossword puzzles and turned that success into the biggest publishing empire in America. Simon and Schuster were the first company to publish paperback books. Today, they publish over 2,000 titles each year. Los Angeles Times columnist Art Buchwald won a Pulitzer Prize for outstanding commentary. His pieces have been putting a funny spin on current events for 40 years.
These great Jewish achievers won the Nobel Prize for Literature.
We don't usually think of someone actually sitting down to write the Torah.
This timeless piece of literature tells the story of the Jewish people from the time of Abraham and serves as a manual on how to be a decent and ethical person. The Torah helped shape the morality and values of Western civilization. That's a great Jewish achievement we can all be proud of.
Imagine if they had Academy Awards 2,000 years ago.
And the nominees for Best Prophet are Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Miriam, and Sarah. And the winner is...
Esther would have definitely won Best Queen. But who would have won Best King? Solomon or David?
Well, David couldn't lose, because Solomon would have shared it with him.
And Moses would have definitely won Best Technical Achievement for parting the Red Sea.
Yeah, and the Torah would have won for Best Picture.
Best Picture? You mean Best Scripture.
Hooray for Hollywood! They hire fellas whose physiques are good. And then they tell them they're the perfect shape men to act like ape men. And they convince them they should. They make them grunt and yell, oh! And people think they're swell, oh! Oh! Hooray for Hollywood! It's really got me, hooray! Hooray! Hooray!
There wouldn't have been any Hollywood without the big studios and the visionary men who created them.
These great Jewish achievers made movies part of our culture and turned dreams into big business.
Sam Goldwyn and Louis B. Mayer formed MGM, which will always stand for Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer.
Harry Cohn was the man behind Columbia Pictures. Harry, Sam, and Jack Warner formed the original WB, known back then as Warner Brothers Studios.
Jewish filmmakers have been involved in the making of all but 6 Academy Award winners for Best Picture.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
You said it. He's looking at you, kid.
Especially don't like them if they're yids.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
You don't understand. I could have had class. I could have been a contender. I could have been somebody.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
What we'll do together in the next few months will make history.
Koufax. Koufax kicks. He delivers. It's up the middle, it's a base hit! Richardson is rounding first, he's going for second. The ball's in the deep right center. Davison over in the gutter, cut the ball off. Here comes the throw, Richardson rounding first, he goes into second, he slides, he's in there, he's safe!
Oh, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Honey, there's a spider in your bathroom the size of a Buick.
Oh, okay.
You really my friend?
I am. Count on it.
Who the devil are you?
My name is Gandhi, Mohandas K. Gandhi.
You remember that time that I bought you the baseball glove when you thought we were too broke? And you're gonna realize that you love me.
I have wonderful news.
So have I. Romeo and Rosaline, scene 1. Mwah!
Steven Spielberg was just 29 years old when he directed Jaws and introduced Hollywood to the blockbuster era. Seven years later, Spielberg's E.T. broke more box office records. In 1993, Schindler's List, Steven Spielberg's Holocaust epic, won 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director.
Yes, Necha.
Nathan, preferred. And Wolf. How many? 600.
Harpo, Chico, and Groucho were the biggest stars of their day.
During the Depression, the Marx Brothers kept millions laughing with their outrageous comedy.
Been waiting all afternoon for you, Jimmy. Come on.
Give my regards to Old Broadway and say that I'll be there ere long.
For 30 years, Richard Rodgers was king of the Broadway musical.
Getting to know you, getting to know all. Joe,
a deer, a female deer, Ray, a drop of golden sun.
When Richard Rodgers' reign was over, another great Jewish achiever dominated Broadway. As a boy, Stephen Sondheim stood outside the house next door, listening to the songs being written by his neighbor, Oscar Hammerstein. One day, the boy was invited in, and his musical training began. 12 years later, Stephen Sondheim's lyrics for West Side Story established his reputation.
Maria, I've just met a girl named Maria.
These award-winning playwrights are all great Jewish achievers.
There's no business like show business, like no business I know.
Illusionists like David Copperfield and David Blaine were inspired by Eric Weiss, a poor Jewish immigrant who came to the United States, changed his name to Harry Houdini, and then became a legend. Houdini escaped from straitjackets and jail cells and buried coffins. Once, he was tied up, locked inside a trunk, and dropped to the bottom of New York Harbor. 59 seconds later, he was swimming to shore. In 1916, radios were being used to communicate with ships at sea. Everyone thought that David Sarnoff was crazy when he had the idea to broadcast music, news, and sports.
It was David Sarnoff who pioneered the national broadcast when he came up with the idea to connect hundreds of radio stations from coast to coast. Forming NBC in 1926, Sarnoff applied his talents to the development of television, and the rest is history. In 1925, Moses Horwitz and his brother Jerome formed a comedy act with Lawrence Feinberg. Moe, Larry, and Curly are still making us laugh.
Certainly, Judgy, the gate is locked.
Will you please step forward? No, no, no. Prepare yourself for the witness box.
Stan Lee is another great Jewish achiever. He drew characters like Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four right from his own imagination. All those cartoon superstars have one thing in common, and it's not the artists who drew them. It's their voices. They all came from one man.
The great Mel Blanc.
Mama, I got skipped to the next class. They gave me I've been expelled.
That's all, folks.
Jewish people may be small in numbers, but we play a big part in the world.
Now that's something to be proud of.
Okay, so if this is the Earth...
Looks like a piece of cardboard to me.
Well, just listen. If you look at the world religions, Christianity represents 33%. 40% are Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, and Buddhists. Other ethnic religions make up 6%. And then another 20% are people who don't have any particular religion at all.
There's only 1% left. Is that us?
1/5 of 1%. That's how many Jewish people there are in the world.
Every day, taking care of business. Every way, taking care of business. It's all mine. Taking care of business. Working overtime. Woo! Taking care of business. Taking care of business. We've been taking care of business. We've been taking care of business. Woo! Taking care of business.
Levi Strauss came to the United States in 1847. During the gold rush, he moved to San Francisco and opened a general supply store. Miners complained that denim pants they bought were always ripping at the pockets.
A tailor named Jacob Davis solved the problem when he had the idea of using rivets to make pant pockets stronger. And the first blue jeans were born.
Jeans play a big part in today's fashion, and fashion is big business. Cosmetics alone is a multi-billion-dollar business. Two of the biggest names in lip gloss and eyeliner are Jewish names. Max Factor was a makeup artist in Hollywood who created his own line of top-selling products. When Josephine Esther Menzer first went into business, she'd answer the phone with different voices, playing the part of a shipping clerk or head of the billing department. Today, the company she started, Estee Lauder Cosmetics, does over $3 billion in sales each year. Back in 1976, everyone was wearing Calvin Klein jeans. In 1986, everyone was wearing Calvin Klein underwear. Today, you can buy Calvin Klein socks and perfume, sheets, and towels.
Ralph Lipschitz began his career working for a men's tie maker. In 1968, he changed his last name and went into business for himself. Today, Ralph Lipschitz is Ralph Lauren, the most successful fashion designer in the world.
After working all the way from office girl to head designer of Ann Taylor, Donna Fask became Donna Karen and started her own company. Today, her DKNY label is everywhere. If they gave out Nobel Prizes for fashion, Ralph, Calvin, and Donna would win for sure. The kiss is another great Jewish achievement.
Come again?
If you eat enough of these, your clothes won't even fit you anymore. Milton Hershey left school in 4th grade to work for a candy maker. 30 years later, he was America's first mass producer of chocolate. Today, Hersheytown attracts tourists from all over the world and provides housing and education for over 1,000 children from troubled homes. These great Jewish achievers shared their wealth
and made the world a better place.
When 19-year-old college freshman Michael Dell had the idea to sell and service custom-built computers without opening a store, no one took him seriously. Today, Dell Computers is a multi-billion-dollar company. Being successful in business is an art.
These major CEOs, past and present, are all great Jewish achievers. David Ben-Gurion had dedicated his entire life to establishing a Jewish homeland in Palestine. As Israel's first prime minister, he was assured of his place in world history. After serving 13 years as Prime Minister of Israel, Ben-Gurion resigned in 1963. He's considered the father of his country.
Not many people know that Israel's first Prime Minister, Golda Meir, actually grew up in Wisconsin. She's one of the few female heads of state in modern history.
Henry Kissinger was the first foreign-born citizen to become U.S. Secretary of State. Many experts credit former Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin for the massive U.S. economic growth of the late 1990s.
Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan is another great Jewish achiever.
Connecticut Senator Joseph Lieberman was the first Orthodox Jew selected as a vice presidential candidate. A government of the majority is the cornerstone of every democracy, but there are times when the majority isn't right.
100 years ago, politicians accepted the fact that labor conditions in the United States were terrible. People worked in crowded factories for almost no pay. It was almost like slavery. Children were kept from school to work long days for 3 cents an hour. It took a great Jewish achiever to change all that.
Samuel Gompers formed the American Federation of Labor in 1881 and served as its president for 43 years. A man of great personal integrity, he fought for fair wages and better conditions. Many great Jewish achievers have also been great activists. In 1964, 2 volunteers from New York City gave their lives defending the civil rights of Black Americans in Mississippi. Andrew Goodman and Michael Schwerner died at the hands of the Ku Klux Klan.
Abby Hoffman and Allen Ginsberg led a movement to end the Vietnam War. History has proven that their cause was just. When Betty Friedan and Gloria Steinem stood up for women's rights, the establishment frowned. Where would we be now without them? During the 70s, Ruth Bader Ginsburg won acclaim for her fight to end institutionalized discrimination against women. In 1993, she became the first Jewish woman ever appointed to the United States Supreme Court.
These Supreme Court justices are all great Jewish achievers. In a world plagued by war, these great Jewish achievers have a special place.
They won the Nobel Prize for Peace.
As the only democracy in the Middle East, Israel stands as a shining example of what can be achieved when people share their hope and work together.
The State of Israel is a great political achievement we can all be proud of. Is chess a sport?
No, it's a game. What difference does it make?
Because we're in the Guinness Book of Records.
Really?
Jewish chess masters won 59% of international tournaments held between 1882 and 1982.
Wow.
Checkmate! Jewish athletes have been winning Olympic medals since the Games began. Irina Kurzenstein won medals at 4 consecutive Olympic Games, a feat not accomplished by any runner, male or female.
When Frank Spellman lifted 859 pounds at the 1948 Games, he took home the gold and set a world record. Harold Abrams' triumph as the first Jewish sprinter to win an Olympic gold medal was the basis of an Academy Award-winning movie, Chariots of Fire. Alfred and Gus Flatow, who won 5 gold medals for Germany in the 1896 Olympics, both died in the gas chambers during the Holocaust.
With the Olympics cancelled in 1940 and 1944, Hungarian gymnast Agnes Coletti lost 2 chances to compete. Then an injury kept her from competing in 1948. At the 1952 Helsinki Games, she took home a gold medal. That would have been enough for most people, but not for Agnes Coletti, who at the age of 35 put on one of the most spectacular exhibitions in Olympic history, winning 4 gold medals at the 1956 Melbourne Games. Competing for Russia, Maria Gorokovskaya won 7 medals, more than any athlete, at the 1952 Helsinki Games.
Mitch Gaylord won 4 medals for the U.S. at the 1984 Olympics.
At the 1996 Games, an injured Carrie Strug put on a heroic performance that ensured the U.S. women their first ever team gold medal. Charlotte Epstein introduced women's swimming events at the 1920 Olympics and led the U.S. ladies team. Mark Spitz won 7 gold medals at the 1972 Munich Games, but his accomplishments were overshadowed by the Palestinian terrorists who attacked the Olympic Village and murdered Israeli athletes. When it was all over, 10 people were dead and a crowd of 83,000 mourned.
World record holder Lenny Kreiselberg won his 2nd gold medal at the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney, Australia.
These Jewish athletes from the United States have all won Olympic medals. At the 2002 Games in Salt Lake City, 2 stellar Jewish athletes ruled the rink. Figure skaters Sarah Hughes and Irina Slutskaya took top honors for their respective countries. Sarah won gold for the United States, while Irina took her silver medal home to Russia. When women's gymnastics was introduced in the 1928 Olympics, the Dutch girls won. 5 members of that team were Jewish. Only one, Elke Levy, survived the Holocaust. Her teammates died in concentration camps, along with their coach, Jerry Kleerkoper. These great Jewish Olympians are among those who perished during the Holocaust.
In 1864, the best third baseman in America was a great Jewish athlete named Lippman Pike, who became the very first professional baseball player when he signed with the Philadelphia Athletics for $20 a week.
70 years later, Detroit Tigers slugger Hank Greenberg was the first Jewish player to be inducted to the Hall of Fame. In 1938, Hank finished the season with 58 home runs, just 2 short of Babe Ruth's record.
As the first Jewish owner-manager in the major leagues, Hank's Cleveland Indians won the 1954 World Series. In 1953, Al Rosen was the first ever unanimous choice for American League MVP, with 145 RBIs and 43 homers. 20 years after he retired as a player, Al Rosen was named president of the New York Yankees. Sandy Koufax, he may be the greatest pitcher of all time.
Koufax won 3 Cy Young Awards, had a 2.76 lifetime ERA, 2,396 career strikeouts, and is still the youngest player ever voted to the Hall of Fame. Quarterback Sig Harris led the University of Minnesota to 2 undefeated seasons, outscoring opponents 1,381 points to 24. At 5'6", 140 pounds, Sig had no business even being on a football field, but this great Jewish athlete has his place in the College Football Hall of Fame. The game's first great passer was Benny Friedman, who made All-Pro 5 times and was the highest paid player of his day.
Sid Luckman was another great Jewish achiever. He had one of the greatest careers in pro football history. As a quarterback for the champion Chicago Bears, he was the NFL's leading passer. As the Bears' safety, he led the NFL in interceptions. And as the Bears' punter, he was the best in the league. Sid Luckman's 7 touchdown passes in a single game is still an NFL record. The Super Bowl was Sid Gilman's idea. So was putting players' names on the jerseys. An All-American at Ohio State, he never played pro ball, but this great Jewish achiever literally left his mark on the game. Known by his teammates as the intellectual assassin, lineman Ron Mix played 10 years in the NFL and was 9 times All-Pro. In 1922, Barney Sedrin, a 5'4" guard, was the highest paid professional basketball player in America. 40 years later, he was inducted into basketball's Hall of Fame.
As a player, Nat Holman led the Boston Celtics to an unmatched record of 531 wins and 28 losses. As a coach, his 1950 City College team was the only team to ever win both the NCAA and NIT tournaments in one season.
Dolph Schayes, NBA Rookie of the Year in 1949, went on to dominate the league, playing in 12 straight All-Star games.
Red Auerbach is the most successful coach in NBA history, with 938 wins. He guided the Boston Celtics to 8 straight world titles, a record that has never been equaled by any coach in any sport.
At a time when professional sports were played by white people, Abe Saperstein had the courage to form an all-black team. His Harlem Globetrotters were the razzle-dazzle models of today's NBA.
Sam Berger was the first Olympic heavyweight boxing champion, winning his gold medal at the 1904 Games. Sam Mossberg scored the quickest knockout in Olympic boxing history. It took him 22 seconds to defeat his opponent and win an Olympic gold medal. Abe Attell held the World Featherweight Championship for 9 years, winning 23 of his first 29 fights by knockout. At 16, welterweight Jackie Fields was the youngest boxer ever to win Olympic gold. He went on to become 4-time world champion. Benny Leonard won 88 straight fights and held the world championship from 1917 to 1925. His 7-year reign is the longest in lightweight division history. While Hitler was shouting that the Jewish people were inferior, we took home medals at the 1936 Berlin Olympics. We had spirit. We never gave up.
That's a tradition we should always hold on to.
Some discoveries really affect the way we live, unlike others which are just fun.
Before CDs, people listened to music on records called 78s. One record, one song. Then you had to get up and put on another record.
Peter Goldmark didn't think that made much sense, so he invented the long-playing record called an LP. 1 LP, 10 songs. Edwin Land invented the Polaroid process. During World War II, his Polaroid Corporation developed the night vision goggle and infrared target finders. After the war, Edwin Land revolutionized photography with his self-developing Polaroid Land camera.
Dean Kamen's medical inventions have helped people all over the world. So when he announced his new invention called IT, People were curious. We had to wait to find out what it was. Now we know. It's a scooter.
Life would go on without something called it. But what would we do without telephones? Hello?
Emil Berliner's carbon microphone made it possible for Alexander Graham Bell's company to mass-produce the telephone. But Emil Berliner wasn't done there. He went on to design the first record player, called a gramophone, for RCA Victor. After serving as director of U.S. naval shipbuilding during World War II, Hyman Rickover was put in charge of the planning and building of the world's first automatic-powered submarine. In 1973, he became the first Jewish admiral in United States naval history. The admiral certainly improved our military defense systems.
But it took another great Jewish achiever to improve our understanding of human defense mechanisms.
At a time when most people didn't even know what the word psychology meant, Sigmund Freud discovered that anger and madness could often be traced to painful feelings from childhood. Virtually every aspect of modern psychology is in some way connected to his work. While Freud was explaining the human mind, another great Jewish achiever was trying to explain the entire universe. Albert Einstein was pushing papers in a patent office when he first proposed a theory of relativity. 12 years later, the London Times was heralding Albert Einstein's new theory of the universe. In 1936, he emigrated to the United States and accepted a post at Princeton.
The Nobel Prize for Physics and Chemistry has been awarded to all these great Jewish achievers.
Yes, but as a known scientist, it was a bit surprising if the girl blinded me with something.
Albert Michelson wins the Nobel Prize for discovering how to determine the speed of light. For his breakthrough research of the human immune system, Paul Ehrlich wins the Nobel Prize for medicine. Niels Bohr discovers how atoms put out energy and wins the Nobel Prize for physics.
Science!
As the first to identify human blood groups, Karl Landsteiner wins the Nobel Prize for medicine. For discovering the magnetic movement of the proton, Otto Stern wins the Nobel Prize. Ernst Boris Chain discovers penicillin and wins the Nobel Prize for medicine. For finding a treatment for tuberculosis, Dr. Selman Waxman wins the Nobel Prize. Donald Glasser wins the Nobel Prize for tracking the motion of atomic particles. For discovering how to regulate cholesterol, Conrad Bloch wins the Nobel Prize. Hans Bethe wins the Nobel Prize for his discovery of energy production in stars. Murray Gell-Mann discovers quarks and wins the Nobel Prize for Physics. Dennis Gabor invents the holograph and wins the Nobel Prize. Gerald Edelman wins the Nobel Prize for discovering the chemical structure of antibodies. Baruch Blumberg discovers a vaccine against hepatitis B and wins a Nobel Prize for medicine. Daniel Nathans won the Nobel Prize for his discovery of restriction enzymes.
Yes, but as a known scientist, it was a bit surprising if the girl blinded me with something. Hello.
Roald Hoffmann develops a new theory of chemical reactions and wins the Nobel Prize. Rita Levi and Stanley Cohen discover growth factors and win the Nobel Prize in medicine. Sidney Altman wins the Nobel Prize for discovering the catalytic properties of RNA. Rudolf Marcus researches electron transfer reactions and wins the Nobel Prize for chemistry. Martin Rodbell and Alfred Gilman share the Nobel Prize for discovering G proteins. Frederick Rines and Martin Pearl share the Nobel Prize for their contributions to lepton physics. Walter Kohn develops the density functional theory and wins the Nobel Prize for chemistry. For his research of oxidation reactions, Barry Sharpless wins the Nobel Prize.
These great Jewish achievers made discoveries that improved the quality of life for people everywhere.
Their contributions will never be forgotten. Baruch Blumberg's research led to the development of a vaccine against hepatitis B and won him a Nobel Prize in 1976. Polio was the disease that crippled President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and millions of others. After Jonas Salk discovered the polio vaccine in 1952, children everywhere began getting polio vaccination shots at school, and a terrible disease was wiped out.
Jewish people have always been small in numbers.
We're like a little family, but we have so much to be proud of.
We've won Nobel Prizes and Pulitzers.
We've won Oscars and Grammys and Emmys and Obies.
We've won Olympic medals and welterweight titles and Cy Young Awards.
We've contributed to every field of human endeavor, and help make the world a better place.
But of all our accomplishments, our survival as a people, that may be the greatest achievement of all.
David Lee Roth lights the menorah. So do James Conn, Kirk Douglas, and the late Dinah Shore. Guess who eats together at the Carnegie Deli? Bowser from Sha-Na-Na and Arthur Fonzarelli. Paul Newman's half Jewish, Goldie Hawn's half too. Put them together, what a fine-looking Jew. You don't need Deck the Halls or Jingle Bell Rock, 'cause you can spin a dreidel with Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock, both Jewish. Put on your yarmulke, it's time for Hanukkah. The owner of the Seattle Supersonicas celebrates Hanukkah. O.J. Simpson, not a Jew. But guess who is? Hall of Famer Rod Carew. He converted.